The November 2nd, 2016 meeting of the Windsor Planning Commission will now come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Gail Schick,
Present.
Victor Talon,
Here.
Steve Sheffel,
Here.
Ron Hardy,
Here.
Jerry Bushelman,
Here.
Ken Bennett,
Here.
First item on tonight's agenda is a review of the agenda itself by the Planning Commission for any addition of items or new business to be added to the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the agenda as written.
I would second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Talon, seconded by Commissioner Sheffel, that we accept the agenda as presented. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed, vote no.
Turn around.
And motion carries unanimously. Took me a minute there to, no, I can't read behind me. Next item is public invited to be heard. If there is anyone in the audience who has an item that they wish to present to the commission that is not on tonight's agenda, now is the time to do so. Seeing there be none, we'll keep moving along. Next item is our consent calendar. Tonight's consent calendar consists of the approval of the minutes of the October 19th, 2016 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the October 19th meeting.
Second it?
It's been moved by Commissioner Talon, seconded by Commissioner Harding, that we approve the consent calendar. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. And the answer is,
Mr. Sheffel and Mr. Hardy.
I voted.
vote early, vote often. Come on, guys.
I did vote early.
Motion carries unanimously.
We can actually vote twice here.
Yeah.
On board action tonight, presentation of the draft 2017 town board budget. Mr. Moyer, and just to let you know, brevity will be appreciated.
Yes. I'm under instruction to move it along, so Crystal, you could start the timer here.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
I don't know how many of you are baseball fans. I know you're not. I'll keep it moving along. We are in the final stages of our budget process. It nearly is a year-round process anymore. We start in the first quarter with the capital improvement, and then we work on it through the summer. We adopt the capital improvement portion first, then we work on the operations. We had a budget retreat with the town board on October 8th. Our public hearing is coming up at our regular board meeting on the 28th of November. So I have a few slides here I will go through as highlights, and then Scott's got one at the end. And I'll just describe, I'll just move along. If you have any questions, jump in. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. So the first thing is we need to figure out what we have as far as revenue. What I call these three items the big three revenue, as it says there, which is our property tax, our 3.2% sales tax, and 3.2% construction use tax. I didn't address in this graph the newest portion, the 0.75 sales and use. I didn't want the graph to get too cluttered. Well, what this shows is the lighter blue color is property tax, the yellow sales, and the purple part on the end, construction use tax. Interesting point on this graph here, you can see down at 2011, we were just coming out of the recession. Therefore, we didn't have quite as many building permits, so the purple part on the end was rather small. Economy got better, that part expanded to where 2016, our projected number, the purple construction use tax is getting larger. I'm sure you guys know, I'm sure Scott's told you, this will be a record year for single-family home permits. Look like from Paul's, what did Paul say for this year, 6 something, almost 700
Right.
estimating.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's a big year, easily. So, what we did with the property tax, I'll get into on the next slide. Well, I'll just go to the next slide, actually. So the property tax, this one is easier to predict than the next two, which I'll cover on the next slide. We get the assessed valuation from the counties, both counties. The preliminary one in August and the final one in December. This was a bit of a surprise for me because last year Weld County sent us a letter saying we should probably expect a decrease in our assessed valuation for this year due to the oil and gas industry. Well, as it turned out, we had an increase in both counties, actually. You can see Weld County, the assessed value there went up 31.8 million, and 23.5 of that was oil and gas related. And Larimer County was nearly entirely from new residential construction. There was also some Weld County residential construction that contributed to that increase. Now, what that means for us, revenue-wise, is that we can keep our mill levy at the 12.03 mills that we've had for more than 10 years now. And we have a increase, well, the property tax collection will be about 5.5 million, which will be an increase without really us having to do anything. So, as I said, that was a bit of a surprise, but we'll go with what they tell us. So, as I said, the property tax is fairly easy to project. We have a couple other items like a highway users tax, the lottery money, things like that, that the state will give us an estimate. We just take their estimate, plug it into the budget. Pretty easy. The other two, sales and construction use tax, are not that easy. The sales tax is a little easier than the construction use tax. Our sales tax has gone up every year for the past 5 or 6 years. I attribute it, our sales tax base is very needs-based, needs-oriented, grocery stores, that type of utilities. And to me, it's just a function of more people live here buying stuff they need here in Windsor. That drives that up. Of course, as I was talking about in the first slide, the construction use tax is harder to predict. We approach it, we want to be conservative because we don't want to spend money we don't yet have. But this year, I think we went into this year with close to 300 permits as the estimate. Well, you can see how that turned out. You know, it's a good problem to have because we have more money than we thought we would. So next year, we went with 400 single-family home permits, which until recent reports from the planning department, even the 400 was making me a little nervous, you know, that we could do that again. But I think we're okay with 400 for next year.
So out of curiosity, what happens when you have a revenue windfall like you have this current year?
I'll cover that on the next slide here. What this is the funding sources that we use to fund our capital improvement plan. And a couple things I want to point out here is you'll notice that nowhere on this list is the property tax. We use the property tax strictly for general fund operations. These items here are what we use to fund our capital improvement plan. To answer your question, Mr. Scheffel, if we have extra funds, a good example of that are the two about in the middle of the page, severance tax and oil and gas income. For example, the severance tax, when I first started here, we we only got about $15,000 in severance tax. It's tied to the oil and gas industry. We just kept it in the general fund at the time because, you know, $15,000, what are we gonna, it's not gonna make that big a difference. Last few years, it's, the highest year was a couple years ago where that number was now over $600,000. What we had done with it is we moved it out of the general fund into the capital improvement fund and used it to do more road work. As if you drive around the town here in the summer months, you can see we're doing a lot of road work. So we made a conscious effort to earmark that, that tax revenue with specific road projects. What we've done with some of these other things, if we had more money than we had anticipated, mostly we kept it in our fund balance to fund projects in the next coming years, thinking that at some point the oil and gas money is going to get lower, which in the case of the severance tax, it has. It went back down to about 200 some thousand. And, you know, it's tied to the price of oil a lot. It's like trying to predict the weather, really. So we adjust it. If we have an exceptionally lean year, which we did back at the recession, we have a, let me step back. We have a capital improvement meeting every month. And what we did back then was we saw what our collections would be. We saw what projects we could add, or if we didn't get money, as much money as we thought, projects we would cut. So it's kind of an ebb and flow kind of thing. This year, what we will do mostly with the extra money is we will keep it in our fund balance to use it for projects next year. And if something comes up that we deem a good project, we'll have extra money to pay for it and hopefully pay cash. That answer your question?
It did, thanks.
So some items in the 2017 budget. We had, this year, meaning 2016, and last year actually, our biggest project was the rec center. Now, we're done with that, so now we're going to go into our new public works and park maintenance building. If you've been up on 15th Street north of town, you can see a lot of dirt being moved around on the north side of the railroad tracks. That's our project. It's a 2-year project, started this year, finished next year. And to go a little further with your question, Mr. Scheffel, we are planning to pay cash for that building. Over the years, through building permits and sales tax collections, we've amassed enough cash that we don't have to borrow for that project. We're gonna pay cash for that. We also were able to receive a DOLA Energy Impact Grant, which also is driven by the energy industry. We applied for a grant. One of the arguments that you have to make on those applications is how the oil and gas industry has affected your city, and make your case on your grant application. We applied for $1.5 million. We got the entire amount, so that worked out pretty well. We will use that as part of the project. This whole slide is related to that project. We have some off-site improvements as far as grading that need to be done over there. Chunk of it is our fiber optic system. We need to run cable over to that building. Currently, all of our buildings, with the exception of our sewer treatment plant, are on our same network, our same computer / telephone network. That site out there, we have to run the line out there, so that will be part of the overall project. Now, at first, our public works guys will move over there. The parks maintenance workers will stay in our existing building that we share with the school. We have some work to do to make that work for just them there. That is the 125. And the final piece of that puzzle is we have a small metal building over in the parking lot by 7th and Ash, near the Legion, that we're going to scrape and get rid of that building. Also, I mentioned street maintenance. We do have a few years ago, we did a pavement study that analyzed all of our streets. We put a plan together on what streets have to be fixed when. We follow that every year. The PCI it's a number of 70. That's where we have pegged our street quality. So we assign money to those projects so that all of our streets meet that quality indicator. I won't read them all to you. You can see there what we plan to do. As I said earlier, we have been using quite a bit of the severance tax money to do those projects. If we get more money, there again, we're in a fortunate situation. We go into it, into the year with a couple extra projects in hand that if we get extra money, we ask the guys which ones we should do, and we try and get them done before the end of the year. So overall, we have, this is our, it's in this page and the next page of projects over $100,000. I talked about most of them. Again, the shop building being the largest. One I wanted to point out is, somebody asked me about this on Sunday, the Kiger Reservoir project. That is the reservoir out on the northwest corner of 392 and County Road 13. We bought that 2 years ago, and now we are at the point where we have to get a structure in there to get water in and out as per state water laws. So if somebody asks you, that's what's going on out there. Kind of a fun project, I think, is the farmer's market over at Boardwalk Park. That old concrete slab where we moved the fire museum off of that, we're gonna make a permanent building there for the farmer's market, similar to in design to the sound stage that's out there now, just bigger, and also put some enclosures that we can use it year round. So making that a more permanent structure there. Again, like I said, these are all projects over 100,000, at 100,000 or over. Just as I guess a color comment, this particular schedule used to be not quite a full page, but now as we're getting bigger and more projects, you know, we're nearly 2 pages.
Just change your font, you'll get it on one page.
Okay. So, and this is a map of our street plans for next year. You see a fairly ambitious attack here. The biggest project being here, our County Line Road, is a complete overlay, as well as over here on Eastman Park Drive. And over here, I don't know what street that is, honestly, but,
Cornerstone.
is that what it is?
Know anybody lives there?
Over where one of those commissioners is?
I've been waiting for that one.
Yeah. Okay, so, anyway, so what, the price tag on all that for 2017 is, you can see there about $24.3 million. That is just for 2017. We have a 5-year plan where we have figured out a way to fund $92 million in projects, which is a pretty big step, I think. But the downside is we also have about 87 million projects that we know we want to do that we have not yet figured out how to pay for those. But I figure 92 million will keep us busy for a while. So that being said, this is Scott's portion of the show here.
Yeah, just briefly, the planning department budget largely stays pretty status quo from year to year. The two big ticket items that we have in the 2017 budget are the $110,000 appropriation for the development code update. You'll recall that was actually budgeted for $160,000 for 16 and 17. However, with the completion of the comprehensive plan dragging a little bit further into this year, we didn't get started on the code update as early as we had hoped. We just had that kickoff on earlier this month. And so we're obviously not going to spend half of that budget amount this year on the code update. So the $110,000 for 2017 represents the bulk of that project, and then there'll still be some carryover into 2018. Then and that is one of the implementation strategies of the comprehensive plan. There's a lot of overlap between the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan that the town board completed shortly after the master plan, or the comp plan was adopted. Another one of those items is the $70,000 that is in the planning budget for a roadway master plan and road impact fee update. Engineering had been working towards the roadway master plan portion of the project, and I had been working on the road impact fee update, which is required by the code to happen every 5 years. So since we were both working on projects that required pretty much the same background information, we were able to combine those into the same RFP, and we'll just have 2 deliverables, but it'll essentially be one project to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak. So those are the 2 big projects that are out of the norm in the planning department budget. And I know after the packets went out, there were some questions about comp plan implementation. So I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on, the comp plan does have a lot of implementation strategies, and one of those is that the comp plan inform some budget decision-making process so that the implementation strategies are being taken not only from the strategic plan or capital improvements, but also the long-range planning that we did in the comprehensive plan. So with the comp plan not being adopted until April, we were already, as Dean said, the budget's a year-round process anymore. So the town board had already had begun discussions about the budget, and we'll be discussing next year what we can be doing to make sure that the comp plan and planning commission input is able to be implemented or given to the town board during the 2018 budget process. But that being said, even though we didn't have a formal comp plan review with the budget, we do have several items. Like I said, the strategic plan included items that are in the comp plan, such as the prioritization of Crossroads Boulevard extension, creating another east-west corridor for truck traffic. That's in both plans, and it's something that will be addressed with the roadway master plan. We also, again, the code update is the biggest one that we're doing. Staff is also working with engineering on a complete streets policy. That was one of the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. We expect to be bringing that before the Planning Commission at a work session in the near future. And then I guess one of the other items I wanted to point out is, the comp plan does have goals and policies specific to downtown. And while there hasn't been a lot that's come before the Planning Commission to date regarding downtown, I wanted to just assure you that the town board and town manager have been and the Downtown Development Authority have all been very active in downtown planning lately. And I've got the town manager volunteered to come tonight and provide a little insight into those discussions. But I just wanted to assure the Planning Commission that there is all kinds of conversations happening downtown. It's just a matter of some of them aren't public public conversations at this point in time. And we would encourage that if we have any specific interest in downtown, that we want to be sure to attend Downtown Development Authority meetings, monitor their agendas, because they are picking up momentum with some of these projects that are being discussed. So with that, if Mr. Arnold would mind maybe filling in some of the downtown information.
Could we have your name and address, please?
Kelly Arnold, Windsor Town Manager. That's a long time for me to sit still and not say anything. I want to get on to what Scott introduced me for, but just a couple other points I want to make on just kind of the dialogue you just heard. First and foremost, on the question of the funds, it's a really good question. And the one thing that I'm very proud of for Town of Windsor is generally our conservative nature of expenditures and our budgeting and what we've been able to accomplish on that. I want to just kind of talk about a couple other things that we were able to accomplish with good reserve levels and what we've done with those. Dean talked about some of those, but a couple other examples that we were very beneficial to have some capacity to absorb tornado, 2008. We were able to draw $1.5 million, $2 million out immediately to put to use because we had those funds set aside in a capacity to address an emergency situation. Now, the beneficial item of all that was we were able to also backfill at the end of the day from all the grants we were able to attain. But when we went into that blindly on May 23rd, the day after, we didn't have any idea how much of that was going to cost us or what was needed, but we knew we had resources to be able to address it. And that's one of those real important pieces to have behind you in a budget, is the ability to address emergency situations. The other part that Dean touched upon is we're the only organization within northern Colorado of any size from the municipal level that did no layoffs, no reductions in service during the recession. And that's because we were able to absorb that time of revenue, lowering of revenue, and be able to use our reserve base to keep up the keep up our level of service and keep our employees as they were. And so those are the elements that go behind the budget, the thinking that goes behind the budget, and it's a very important component to what we do. And so, for example, Monday night, Dean is presenting a couple of refinance opportunities to the board for some debt we have. The question is going to be, do we want to do that? Long-term savings, but initial impact to higher annual costs to make those payments off, as you know, when you do those. But we have the capacity to be able to do that. So if the board's interested in doing that, we can save some money over the long term because of the short-term benefits we have for reserves behind us to be able to absorb those. So that's one of the kind of the theories that we go through and philosophies we go through the budget. On the budget itself, I would suggest that if the Planning Commission wants to be more proactive or give input on the budget itself, there is that opportunity. Scott is your representative to do that. It is my recommended budget per the charter and per state statute that goes to the board. So I take all and any input for my recommended budget. Obviously, then they take it from there for 2 months and then change or modify based upon what they think is recommendations. But early on, if you want to look at the budget, talk about it, talk about programs with Scott, it's Scott's job, essentially, to come back and communicate those to myself. And if I'm not in agreement with that, then it's really my job to come to you and talk to you about why or not, or what can be added. Because I want to support what you want to support if I can within a recommended budget. So again, Scott talked about the timing of that this year and such, but I would say as a standard regular agenda item in June or July, get it on there and put it on there and talk about it and see what his ideas are that he's thinking about, what your ideas may be, and then see how they can move forward through the budget deliberation. Now the fun stuff. Downtown is downtown. I've been here now 10 years almost. My passion and love is downtowns. I've had the benefit of working in other communities that have successful downtowns, and I've seen the opportunity and what we can do here in Windsor. It's taken a lot of patience and effort. But to some good grace, we had an individual and group who's come in and expressed interest to do something with the mill. That has made top priority of ours to get that done. There's been no other top priority by the board to me. There's probably been no other top priority to the board by the citizens, quite frankly, is to figure out what to do with the mill. So when that opportunity came, we kind of set aside and put our resource and time to make sure we could figure out how to make that happen if it made sense. That's what we've been doing pretty much nonstop for the last 3 months. And the fruits of that labor is that this month, there will be, if everything goes well, a closing on the mill to that developer. In 2 weeks from, or a week and a half, the town board will be considering an incentive agreement to the developer of a significant amount to make it happen. It's going to be an upfront cost to help with the development cost of them to get it done, and there's going to be some back increment share. The DDA is doing the same thing. They're putting in money up front, and they're also sharing their increment to get that done. Philosophically, the board's going to come from many places if they support this, and I think they will. But really, to me, it comes down to that if we don't do this with this developer, and I can tell you there have been multiple parties come and go over the last 8 years looking at that building and have walked away. And I don't trust that the next one's going to say, this is what we want to do if this one doesn't happen. And then we're faced with what do we do with this building and the cost of litigation, demolition, or whatever we end up taking ownership of the property. All those is going to be equivalent or equal to what we're going to participate with this developer to make it a development. I think that when it gets revealed this month to you publicly, you're going to be very proud of saying this is something that we look forward to having open if this developer follows through on their schedule by holiday season a year from now. So think about that. Your job is to keep up with him. His job is to keep up with him. I think we're well along that way, knowing what to expect, but there's going to be site plan, there's going to be 257, 392 improvements are going to be made, there's going to be PED making improvements, we're going to have to talk about parking, and all those issues coming your way in the next 6 months, very quickly. Now, with that being aside, 6 months ago, we thought we wanted to kind of go out and talk about the balance of downtown and what could bring. And again, this project set us back on that effort, so we put it aside. Since then, we've had no less 4 large developers in the region come to us and talk to us about what they can or what is available for opportunity in downtown, including the lot between 4th and 5th that's owned by the Downtown Development Association. They own all that, and other possible redevelopment parcels within downtown. So now our challenge is to get back on that bus and try and figure this out with a potential developers of interest. Just yesterday, the mayor and vice mayor and myself met with the DDA director and the DDA board chair and vice chair to talk about what is our role in this. Do we care, and does the town and DDA, should they care and have some control of what might happen on that? Or do we kind of let this kind of happen and see what happens? That's a great philosophical discussion. And if we care or if we want to see what's happening, what do we need to do to help make it happen? So that discussion just started. We're going to keep on discussing it. In the meantime, these 4 developers, and I know there's a 5th that's coming in town next week, are going to continue working on their interests. And so if this economy continues, and if things go with the mill, my prediction is things are gonna be shaping up and changing in downtown. And again, your role is going to be assisting them and us on making sure it happens in an appropriate manner. Our role would be what kind of help do they need to do that? If we agree with what they want to bring forward, or we agree what we would like to see brought forward. You know, also for a year prior, we spent a good fair amount of time on the library feasibility study. I hope you were in kind of walking through that and following that. But we're using that feasibility study along with the downtown guidelines that you looked at in 2010. That was developed in association, and DDA's inherited that, to kind of come with what could be feasible down there from a redevelopment perspective. So the good news is downtown is starting to happen. That's gonna get us into our first real redevelopment effort. I think Greenfield's easy. Greenfield's gonna happen. We gotta work through issues like we talked about tonight and stuff like that. Redevelopments where we need to really focus on what's our role, how are we going to do that? What are other opportunities in redevelopment in Windsor? And start talking about that, because our community's aging, our real estate is aging as far as retail, some spots. And so once we kind of get our appetite on redevelopment opportunities, then we can start talking about other areas. And that's where I think you can help us identify those other areas and talk about that. That's clearly delineated in comp plan. Our efforts should be looking internal and out and maintaining the integrity of this community in Main Street and downtown. And then from there on, making sure the rest develops appropriately and right. So that's kind of, I want to give you that update in downtown. Again, I think there's going to be a lot of big news. The meeting on November 14th for the town board. We'll have the kind of the incentive package. DDA will be considering November 16th. If both boards adopt that, then the developer is committed to getting the project started by the end of this month.
That's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah,
So that's all I can really tell you. That's not within the level of confidentiality, but I think you get a sense that there are things happening.
Okay, good.
Any
Thanks, Ken.
questions that I can
Any
answer?
questions for Kelly? Okay. Any questions for Dean?
So again, I would encourage you, anytime you have questions, invite me, or keep track of that DDA agenda. Or if you think it's important that you get involved in that, they meet monthly, third Wednesday of the month at 7:30 a.m. downstairs. Feel free to get in there and kind of participate with them. They are our development wing downtown. That's what we need to entrust them with doing. They obviously need guidance and support, but ultimately it's their downtown, and they're gonna help be the owners of what they build down there, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, thank you. Scott, anything, any other comments?
Just, I'd say, you know, I wish that our code update was, I wish we were wrapping that up instead of kicking that off, because part of that code update does involve the form-based code that would apply to downtown, that would make some of these redevelopment projects a lot easier to fit into the context of the built environment that's already there. We'll figure out a way to get it done, just because these are gonna be high priority projects. It's just, it would be nice to have the new code in place already. But we'll all be going through that over the next year and a half as well.
It's not like you didn't have anything to do last year, huh?
No, we're checking things off the list.
Okay. Moving on, communication from planning commission. Jerry, you have anything? Ron? Steve? Nope.
No communications.
Communication from town board liaison. Ken?
No communication, Mr. Chair.
Communications from staff. Dean, you have anything? And by the way, thank you for coming tonight and enlightening us. Anything, Scott?
No communications.
Anything from the boss?
No, move to adjourn.
We be adjourned.